center called Ayurveda, and we are located in Oyster Bay, and we do Ayurvedic consultations, herbal medicines, we do Ayurvedic classical treatments, everything to um, everything to counsel from an Ayurvedic perspective. So we're very excited to. I'm always excited to talk to Danielle, and I'm really excited to talk about today's topic.
Great. Did you hear that feedback?
Yeah, I think it's going to take because we have a phone enzyme.
There's a way.
Maybe you could turn the volume down.
How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
Ah, okay. Now I'm on two things.
Me too. Two brains are better than one.
Technology.
Okay. So I want to, just full disclosure, tell you where this talk came from. So the idea was conceived this month, and it was pretty much the day after I started bleeding, got my period, and it just dawned on me that, oh, that's why I was so hungry for the past few days. And I know that if I am feeling something, and I've come to know this the longer I practice and the longer I teach, that if I'm feeling something, generally the world around is also feeling it. There is a connection that we all share, which is why the teachings of yoga and Ayurveda meld so well into the human experience, because they both pick up on what we're fundamentally made of. Right? So I called Jill and I said, I think it's time for another conversation. It's been a while. The last time we spoke was during the pandemic about the concept of pandemic. Yeah. And here we are, still in the pandemic. But I figured it was time to focus on something else that's been coming my way, which is many people who are coming for yoga therapy now are dealing with being at home, feeling complacent and overeating. So what Jill contributed to our conversation is, rather than just focus on menstrual related cravings, let's open it up and talk about cravings in general. Yeah. So that we can, address the whole population, whole craving population. So, this brings me to this funny little story, which is that the first time that I can ever remember having cravings was when I was about 13 years old, and it did happen to coincide with the onset of my menstrual period. And I just remember wanting potato chips and chocolate chip cookies at the same time. Like I would make like a potato chip sandwich with the chocolate chip cookies. And fast forward 13, 23, 33, like over 30 years, I'll still do something similar. I'll have like almonds and a organic, fair trade, vegan chocolate, like salted chocolate bar or something like that. And so what came up for me when I thought about cravings from the yoga perspective is that there is, and this is something Jessica Char shared with me a long time ago, that when we have the human mind, we also have many obstacles that are there. And the two obstacles that I would love to share about today are raga, which is desire, and dvesha, which is aversion. And what he basically said about these, and it really rung true to me, and especially with regards to the topic of cravings, is that they're two sides of the same coin. So what I started to do in my daily life, since we decided we were going to have this talk, is look at how my own cravings, that is raga, that is a desire to have something, whatever the thing is, whether it's, a person, a food, an experience, how often the desire to have something comes from an aversion that I have to something else. So that these two obstacles, they work together. And so whether the aversion is to, for the most part, I think as we continue on the path of yoga practice and self-exploration, it's to a feeling that I'm feeling that I don't want to address. I don't want to feel it. I just want to soothe myself. And the easiest way to soothe is through eating. Especially, and I know I've had this conversation with many women of Mediterranean ancestry, is that we grow up in a culture where food is love. And so when I don't feel love, so when I feel all these other feelings, such as anger, resentment, rejection, abandonment, when I don't feel love, I want to feel love. And the easiest way to feel it is to eat the cookie, to eat the chocolate, whatever it is. Or, if it's not food, to, when I was younger, I used to go on runs in the woods, like to run it off, or just to do something. I'm craving something deep, some deep type of nourishment that I'm not getting. So when our healthy needs go unfulfilled, we make unhealthy choices. And they're often not rooted in the moment. They're rooted in very, very old experiences, which in yoga we would call a vasana. So something happened a very long time ago, right? Let's say I fell off my bike or something like that, and I got a scrape. And then I'm like afraid. I have a vasana or a leftover impression of fear or of sadness. I can't go play with my friends anymore. And so my memory that is based on fear perpetuates into some behaviors. Maybe my parents took me out for an ice cream to make me feel better. And so I was able to fulfill or to soothe myself with something else other than actually processing whatever trauma it was that evolved. And so that perpetuates. And from my experience, I noticed, Jill and everyone, that this is really transgenerational, especially, I can only speak with confidence from my own culture, but this soothing with food thing is really, really old. And whether it's from a culture that tends to do that or not, it is the easiest way to say everything's okay. Everything's okay. Have the drink, smoke the pot, have the sex, eat the cookie, whatever it might be. So I'm going to just pause there for a moment so that I can give you a chance to say something.
Yeah, I think what you've brought up is really well said. The idea of craving something on the alternative side of from aversion, from
Yeah.
coming from what I don't want to feel, what I don't want to have, and then going into, well, what is the most accessible thing that I truly want? What is the easiest way or the easiest connection that I can make um, that allows me to avert myself from the pain or from the residual vasana,
Yeah.
and rather move into to a easily accessible, nourishing moment. And quite often it's food because that is something that the body accepts as nourishment. And it's really the only thing that the body requires in order to build itself. The rest of it is a closed system. It can do everything. But food is the only substance that we get from the outside that actually builds and nourishes and creates new cells and new tissue. So it is the first thing that we look at, because it's readily accessible in our society. It's easy to promote for many of us. It's easy to get what we need. What interests me and what I think we talk about a lot in Ayurveda is the way the mind determines what will soothe and what will feed this craving. So even though when you were a kid, you had this chocolate chip cookie and potato chips,
Yeah.
you were looking, your body was looking for salt and sugar, which are two of three tastes that actually pacify the vata dosha.
Oh my goodness.
When vata is feeling destabilized, vata in excess will make you feel destabilized and make you feel shaky and ungrounded. And so the thing that pacifies vata is sweet, sour, and salty taste. And so the sweet and the salty is very easy to get. Some people do crave the sour taste as well, but that sweet and salty, that salt and sugar is something that we also get immediate satisfaction from. Salt on the palate and sugar in the brain. Sugar wakes us up, it brings our blood sugar high, it gives us a shot of energy. And so the body is responding to the sugar and the mouth, the palate is responding to the salt. So we awaken to those tastes. And that is something that, is coming directly from the body trying to pacify the vata. Unfortunately, when the mind gets a hold of those sweet and salty, what is sweet and salty to the mind? Well, it could be potato chips and a chocolate chip cookie to an 8-year-old. It could be French fries and mashed potatoes, or like something really sweet, or a chocolate bar to somebody that's older. But whatever the context, it's your mind that's the context that decides what sweet and salty it is that I want.
Huh.
The body's not asking for chocolate chips and potato chips and
Chocolate chip.
and a cookie. The body's asking for sweet and salty, but the mind is saying, well, this is what I relate sweet and salty with.
Right.
And this is what I relate being an 8-year-old with, or being sick and having my mom serve me, or anything that's, a nourishing memory. So the mind chooses the foods that feed that sweet and salty. I remember when I was pregnant, and I've been a vegetarian almost all my adult life. And when I was pregnant, I actually wanted.
Jill, one sec. I think you're not on Instagram right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There you are.
Hold on.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. Anyway, when I was pregnant, I wanted American cheese and Yoo-hoo. American cheese and I never even ate it before, but that was my craving. I wanted sugar and salt, right? But American cheese and Yoo-hoo was the thing that fit I don't know if it was like a stored vasana from when I was a kid and I saw the Yoo-hoo commercials, but whatever it was, that's what was pulling me. So again, that's what the mind can do to kind of temper what your body is asking for, and then your mind kind of determines what that is. So when the body is in craving and the mind is filtering, it's very hard to resist that craving. But to recognize that the mind can choose better options, or options that may not stimulate the body, because the problem with quick sugar is that it stimulates the body and actually aggravates vata. With more complex sugars like grains and and root vegetables and things that that stabilize the blood sugar while they're being digested, but is still adding to blood sugar, this is going to be more stabilizing and going to be more pacifying to vata.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Mm.
So, and it also aligns with my, I want to, since we're well into our live today, I want to start offering some solutions for cravings, because I think that's really what we're looking for is how do we make a choice even? How do we get to a place where we can actually make a choice in those moments when we're about to buy the boots? You don't want to know how many pairs of boots I have. Buy the boots, eat the cookies. How do we actually stop to make a choice? And so, from a yoga perspective, we practice so that we can actually identify where we are at with regards to the kleshas. So, where are our levels? And when they are high level, it's really impossible to do anything at that point. So the idea is to remain aware over time
Mhm.
about where our levels of desire are, where our levels of aversion are, so that we can keep them dormant and create a vasana in our system, an impression of dormancy of kleshas, which will also equal an increase in sattva, guna, so that when we are embarking on our daily life and we feel even a little bit overcome by dvesha or raga, we're able to identify it before it gets to the high level. And so that's why we practice. That's why we practice yoga, so that we can develop the awareness to identify when we are out of balance before we get too out of balance and start making wrong decisions. And also, look at how the kleshas cycle. I mean, I know as a woman, and this is kind of a funny story, there was someone a few years ago that I had an interest in only when I was ovulating. And I had a feeling that if I would just wait a few days, I would lose the interest. And it was true. It was like clockwork. I watched this for a few months. I was actually watching the rise and fall of my gunas because I didn't want to make a mistake. I didn't want to do something that would take me down the wrong path. I didn't want to give into a craving, knowing very well that my cravings are very connected to my cycle still. So, but if we can look at the cycle of the day, the cycle of the week and the weekend, or the cycle of the seasons, and start to tune into how whatever raga we have is eventually going to swing back the other way to dvesha. Whatever dvesha we have is going to swing back to raga. I do believe that we can start to get our cravings under control. One more point that I'd love to bring up is that within the text Yoga Sutra, we see in the section on niyama a beautiful concept that we are able to incorporate into our daily life as practice. So the way that we can curb our impetus to choose what puts us more out of balance is through the practice of santosha. So this idea of practicing contentment and being satisfied in a way that's not related to anything that we are desiring other than a feeling of joy and clarity, and being able to practice feeling content and practice feeling at ease in situations when we're not at ease. This just becomes part of our life. So via watching our cycles and how they function, whatever the cycles are. Again, like I know for me, I'm not craving anything in the morning, but if I do have cravings, they would come more toward the evening, right? So I'll notice that and I'll become aware before they get out of hand sometimes no. I just, disclaimer, just because I'm talking about this doesn't mean that I always have it under control. None of us do. Just putting that out there. The other thing that I've found is functions very well, because I do have some students that I'm working with actively for the purpose of weight loss and just improving health overall, is adding in some sort of mealtime ritual that includes some pranayama before eating, or if they feel the need to eat when they're already full, arising some pranayama, as well as a meal prayer. So doing a prayer, like saying something out loud, holding the bowl, putting their mind and intention into the idea that we're actually, as yoga understands it, we're feeding the fire. We're not feeding our desire, we're not feeding anything else but the internal fire, so that we can be healthy, so that food is actually nourishing us optimally. So those are a few solutions that I would like to offer from the yoga perspective, and I would look forward to hearing yours as well, Jill.
Well, that overlaps with the Ayurvedic perspective. If we're talking about imbalance and primarily a destabilized moment, where when you were talking about the duality of raga and desha is more of a vata imbalance, then the thing to regulate vata when it takes over is, or the lack, which is what vata is, because it's made of air and ether, and it creates a lack, an emptiness of sorts, a place that needs to be filled. We need to stabilize the energy of the vehicle, of the vessel. So that means regular meals, and that means conscious eating, where you're not eating on the run, or you're not eating as per what your eyes say looks really good, or the quantity that you might have made for yourself, that when you were really hungry could be 2 or 3 times the size of really what you can take in. So regulation, routine is really what helps to stabilize the body and to satiate the body, so then you can do the work of the mind by doing pranayama, by doing meditation, by allowing yourself to be the witness of these cycles, of these cravings. You'll have less of them if you stabilize the body, that anamaya kosha, if you stabilize that food body and regulate it and satisfy it. You give it the right amount of sweet, the right amount of salt, the right amount of sour, pungent, bitter, astringent, those tastes. And you feed the body so it's well balanced, the cravings will lessen physically, and then emotionally you can do the work to lessen what's happening in the mind. When both the body and the mind are going after the same thing, it's very hard to resist. But if you can stabilize the body, then you can work with the mind with some of the practices that Danielle has to offer. So that really works for any craving. And the last thing that I want to say about that is, when you're craving something, the first thing to remember is that usually we crave what we are already in balance about. Like if we are hot and angry and disturbed, we may go for that spice, or we may go for that alcohol. We're pushing ourselves. It's the law of physics. We're pushing ourselves into the deeper imbalance. But if we are balanced physically, physiologically, and mentally, emotionally, then what we crave or what we desire usually is there to support the balanced person. So pay attention to where those cravings are coming from. Stabilize the body by routinely giving it what it needs, and make the choices when you have that control, and the cravings will definitely lessen.
That is such great advice. And it does bring up a question for me, which is that there are legitimate nutritional cravings that we have. And then there are the cravings that we have that are based on, I would say, emotional or behavioral,
Right.
experiential chronic deficits. So, how do we determine? Because I know that there are times in my life that I will deprive myself of things for physical reasons, if it's almost bikini season, I might deprive myself of something so that, I don't know what I'm doing, a contest of how long I can wear a bathing suit for. I don't know, right? So how do we determine the difference between a nutritional craving and the other type of craving that is, it's really because based on a deficit. Like I know, and I'm sure there are a lot of vegetarians out there that are listening in today, that when I first became a vegetarian when I was like 18 years old, and vegan when I was like 20, I I did not eat enough protein in my diet. And somebody who owned a health food store back then said, "So what did you eat today?" Because I went into the health food store. I was like, "Oh my God, I want some of this, I want some of that." And it was all sugar. And he said, "What did you eat today?" And I didn't eat enough protein. And when I have protein now at every meal, some form of protein, I feel so much more satisfied. So for me, that was fully a nutritional craving. So how do we distinguish between cravings? That I won't be able to answer.
Yeah, and I think that from this perspective, the simple answer, and of course everyone, it's a little bit more complex depending on what your imbalances are, what your condition is, what your diet is. But to first look at the diet from a point of view of balance, and to make sure that the sugar craving is definitely when you're a vegetarian, or if you've deprived yourself of carbohydrates, which is pretty common these days,
Oh my
especially
goodness.
with
Yeah.
people who are trying to, the sugar and fat have become the villains, and especially sugar. And there is, it is clear when someone is depriving themselves. I remember back in the day, my sisters would have a salad and a Diet Coke, and then crave the French fries and crave the chocolate cake. What's missing? Fat and sugar from that paradigm. So definitely having it, given your digestion is working well, because in Ayurveda, that's really the essential piece of this, is the assimilation of nutrients. But given that your digestion is working well, and you are choosing what to eat at meals, you want to balance not only the food groups, but the substances. Do I have enough bitter? Do I have astringent? Do I have sour? Do I have sweet? Do I have salty? These are the tastes that represent a full nutritional palate, and thereby all the food groups. So this is what we look at when we're looking at stabilizing the diet and regulating the diet. And that will help to assuage those nutritional cravings that then will be easier to separate from emotional cravings. Because when your nutritional cravings are assuaged, then the rest is in your mind. The rest is what your mind is telling you to do. And it's a lot easier for you to redirect your thinking when your body is not pushing for a nutritional deficiency.
That's so valuable. And, I was just seeing a student who's Indian, and her mom came into the picture. And what what I was sharing with them was when I was pregnant, and again, we come back to like the female life cycle and all the mini cycles that we have within it. All I could eat in the first the second during the first trimester was pongal. You know pongal? Yeah, so it was just such a nourishing food for me. And having been in South India for so long, South Indian food really has turned into my soul food. Even more so than some of the food that I grew up on, because when I eat it, I feel so extremely satisfied. So I incorporate a little bit into my everyday life. But when I go to the South Indian restaurants in Hicksville, I'm like, good. I can think straight. Like I don't want anything else. I can like have really nice reactions and communications with all the people that I interact with for the rest of the day. So, to your point, there is something to eating in harmony with the tastes. And I think that's a good segue into what we'll focus on this weekend, or part of what we'll focus on this weekend in our virtual retreat, which you are all invited to. It's going to be a combination of yoga and Ayurvedic practices and theories to transition the whole system into spring. But I always look forward, Jill, to your contributions in this department, because that is part of your expertise. And so we will be, Jill, can you just share a little bit about what you'll be?
Well, we're going to take it into the kitchen, and spices, all the spices that you may already have that you're cooking with, they all have these particular tastes
Yeah.
and properties, whether they're heating or cooling, or what their after effect is in the body. And we'll learn a little bit more about that, about cinnamon, and about all different spices, oregano and parsley, and things that you can mix for this season, because this season is cold and damp. This is what we call kapha season, and we've got cold, cool, damp weather that's very heavy,
Mm.
and it can slow down the digestion, and all the fluids in the body become more viscous. And so this way we want to use more clearing spices and plants that are coming up now that are going to help us navigate the heaviness of spring and prepare us for the season coming ahead, which is summer.
Yay. Well, I look so forward to being a student for that portion of our retreat, and also to co-teaching. I love to do that together. And as usual, our conversations do not disappoint. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet today, and to have this conversation. If you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the comments, and if we don't answer them right now, we'll get back to you. Thank you for joining us and for taking.
Register for Sunday.
That's a great question. So I'm also going to put the registration link in the comments on Facebook and in Instagram. If you go to the link in our bio, my bio, you can very easily register for this weekend's retreat. We'd love to have you, and thank you. I hope that we're leaving you with some information and also actionable solutions to, I don't want to say conquer, that's very patriarchy, but to work with yourself and what comes up for you with regards to your excess desires or aversions with food and whatever else, shopping, drinking, whatever the things are, whatever your perceived vices are. They really can turn into your best friends if you can be in a different kind of place when they arrive. So thank you. Thank you, Jill.
Bye.
Bye.